My name is Nettie Wild, and I'm the director of KONELÍNE, Our Land Beautiful. I have a huge passion for the northwest of BC. This KONELÍNE is a love letter to the northwest. I've had the very real privilege of traveling throughout the northwest for the last 20 years, a lot of it by horseback, and because I think the most beautiful way to see the world is through the ears of a horse. And so I've come to know it a lot, and I really started to, a few years ago, realize this beauty, this landscape is undergoing huge change. And I thought, what can I do as a human being and as a filmmaker? And I thought, well, capture it now, capture that change, what that face of change looks like. And most importantly, bring a really curious heart instead of a judgmental one. Because one of the things that I've really learned about the Northwest is that it's extraordinarily beautiful, and the people up there are equally extraordinary. And I didn't want to shortchange any of them with southern city assumptions.
Right.
You know, and so as this land is going under this huge change, it was for me to explore it and try and find the real beauty and complexity in every single person, whether that person was a diamond driller working for the mining industry or somebody who was protesting against it. It wasn't for me to bring my assumptions as to whether or not they should be doing that work. And so I'm hoping it led to a surprising piece of art, because it sure was surprising to make for us as filmmakers. First of all, it's way up north. If you ever want to shoot any film, but especially a documentary, do it in your backyard. So it's huge distances, and not just time in a car, but in a chopper or hiking or on a horse, or, you know, we wanted to capture a wilderness, and that's the price of admission. It's tough. And we wanted to capture it with real big screen chops. So we were bringing equipment that normally that you find in a studio. We were shooting in widescreen, so think Lawrence of Arabia, that's the frame ratio we were using. We were shooting a lot in slow motion. We were shooting, our sound is surround sound. And to take all of that up into the wilderness is a huge challenge. But if you nail it, the payoff is enormous. And the access was really hard, because we weren't just going into a wilderness, we were going into a wilderness that's on the cusp of real change, which means, guess what? There's huge controversy. Mother Nature sowed the seeds for this big battle for hearts and minds. So you've got this extraordinary landscape with so much animal life moving across it that the hunters referred to it as the Serengeti of the North. You've got the whole land is threaded with copper and gold, so much so that the mining industry calls it the Golden Triangle, and it's home to the Tahltan First Nation. So the stage has been set. And within that, to get access to the mining industry was really difficult. They just saw me as this, you know, kind of liberal southerner that was going to come up and crucify them. So I couldn't get in for the longest time. And also, interestingly enough, the more militant factions of the Tahltan made it really tough for me, because one of the leaders of the blockades up there said, unless I contributed my truck to the blockade, I'd lose access. And I'm going, whoa, you know, I'd like you to reconsider that for a moment, because I think my camera is more useful to you in the long term than my truck for a couple of nights. But she didn't go for it, and I was thrown off the blockade. So there was a point where I couldn't get access to into the mines, and I couldn't get access into the blockade. But you know what? It was okay, because we had, as a team of filmmakers, made a commitment that we were going for cinematic poetry. We were not going for the who, what, why, when, and where of kind of news documentary, and it forced our hand. And my dad was a foreign correspondent, and he always said, "Net, the best stories are right under your nose." And so we just went for the poetry in people who we did have access to, and then that one open door led to another and another, and we ended up just being completely and utterly gobsmacked and surprised by what we found. And I hope the audiences are too. I was really surprised by the elegance and poetry of the helicopters flying in the Northwest Transmission Line. This turned into something that turned from an industrial construction zone into something that looked like the opening of La Dolce Vita. You know, when you have the world's biggest helicopter flying in a 16,000-pound tower, and just imagine it as it goes over the mountains, it catches the light. It's like these flying crosses going over the mountains. So all of us, the whole crew, we couldn't believe what we were seeing. We couldn't believe what these people were doing. So what we found, and it was so good that this happened early on in the shoot because it determined the language, the cinematic language for the piece. But we realized, geez, our job is to deliver the image, not a polemic, because in those images, we were finding the elegance of engineering, the beauty of the landscape, the dexterity of these linemen who are big burly workers reduced to being puny compared to this massive undertaking, and the devastation of the clear cut. It was all in the frame. We didn't have to say a word as long as we did our job as artists and delivered the goods. So we shot it with an 800mm lens, we shot it in slow motion, and when we eventually showed the footage to the linemen, one of them came up to me beforehand and said, "You're not trying to set us up or anything, are you?" And that was the attitude of business, of industry. And I said, "Just check out this footage. Just look at it." And he and all his buddies and the crew gathered around the tailgate of our truck where we set up our monitor, and they had the same reaction that we did. They just looked at the monitor and we went, "Holy, we've never seen ourselves that way before." And we went, "This is the language of the film." And my favorite review is from a woman who came up to me and said, "I hate that Northwest Transmission Line and everything it stands for, and I hate the fact that I love that scene in the movie." And I just went, bingo. That's where we want the audience to be. And there was, we were surprised by Heidi Gertfurt, who's the biggest guide outfitter up there, big game hunter, who's a woman, has this really tough territory where we film her swimming her 17 horses across the river. That was a surprise. And she turns out to be the biggest environmentalist in the film, which I think will be a big surprise for the audience. We were surprised by Kelly Quash, who is a young diamond driller in the mining industry, and who loves his job and loves being in the outdoors on a diamond drill platform, and doesn't love the fact that his grandfather is protesting against him. That was a surprise. I had no idea. Kelly told us that. He volunteered that story. And I think the reason he did and others were willing to be vulnerable in front of our camera was because they sensed we weren't out to get them. We were just curious, and we were surprised by every single character in the film. They're wild and wacky up there in the Northwest, and we tried to do them justice.